Alright guys, so I am back out here. I stayed up all night editing video, so I was exhausted. So after I took a little nap and recharged the batteries, and oh, here we go. Look at that. I'm gonna go see if I can find some hungry bass. And right out of the gate, they're chewing. So here's the thing, it is a shad bite. I've got one good fish on the duck and a really good fish on the got that little chunk right there. On the top toe this morning, and that's a topwater bite. So other than the topwater bite, they are aggressively feeding on shad. So when the fish get on a shad bite, oh look, next cast, oh there's that one just popped off. Sorry about that guys, came unbuttoned. But when the fish get on a shad bite, it's one of those things where it's like they don't want hardly anything else. I've thrown plastics, I've thrown it all, and when they get on a good shad bite, they just want shad. You know, the shad are balled up right now. They're thick wads, and the bass are just wrecking. So what's cool is I get to experiment with the different types of shad presentations. The water's super clear, and so I caught quite a few fish on a spinnerbait, but I just felt like even with a light leader, the bass were just getting a really good look at the bait. And so I wanted to experiment a bit. There's a lot of hydrilla and milfoil, you know, just below the surface here. And so the deeper diving crankbait was just too deep. And so what I did is I put on this little 1.5, you know, dives less than a foot, or, you know, KVD Strike King bait. And that. So what I'm doing is I'm actually throwing it into these pockets, and I'm reeling it, but I'm kind of doing like a stop and start. Reel it down, tick the grass, and instead of ripping it out like you would do with a lipless crank, I'm kind of reeling it. I'm using a little bit shorter rod, a moderate action rod that's not necessarily a crankbait rod, but it's that moderate action that allows me to have a really good crankbait feel and that little bit deeper flex. So what I'm doing is I'm just reeling the bait until I feel the grass, and when I feel it, I just stop it. And the bait backs up out of there, and then I just keep it going. And man, when it hits the right holes and pockets, they are coming up out of there and getting and hitting it with reckless abandon. So I played with it a little bit earlier, you know, and I didn't film it just because I wanted to see if it was working. And I wanted to see, I mean, this is my first time fishing this bait. I'm a big fan of the Strike King KVD series, but I hadn't fished this bait yet, and I didn't know, you know, what the wobble was going to be like or how it was going to perform in clear water. So anyway, put it through the paces, caught 6 or 8 fish on it that I didn't film. You know, just starting to film this segment, I cast it out and caught one on the first cast, and then hooked one and lost it on the 3rd cast. So they're definitely into this bait. And I think in this clear water situation, that wobble, that changing angles, and it doesn't give them a good, easy look at the bait. And anytime you do that in super clear water, you'll have more success. All right, guys, so as I get ready to head out, I hear bait getting crashed right here behind me. And so I'm gonna stop and fish right here by the boat ramp and see if there's some hungry bass. Well, there's one little guy, but there's a fish. Yeah, they're digging this bait. A little nervous water right there, so that's probably where they're keying in on that school of shad. But I'm gonna keep looking. thing you can do when you have bait fish come up and crash the surface is obviously look for the nervous water for the school that they were on. But one thing that I have found very successful is whatever directions the wind's blowing, start working incrementally that direction, and you've got a really good chance of heading them off at the next spot, because that bait is usually feeding against the wind and the bass are ambushing them in the opposite direction. So just a little thing that's always worked really well for me. So they were blowing up over here to my right, so I'm just kind of fan casting back and forth out here in this flat ahead of where they where I think they're headed. One thing that works really great for these shallow water cranks, especially the super shallow ones, is when you cast them out, just give them a little poop poop on the surface, let them sit there. I get a lot of blow-ups on fish that are just sitting there, and I throw that bait. Oh, there's one right there. Look at that. Oh, this is a good fish, guys. This is a real good fish. Look at that bow. But I throw that bait out there, let it sit, give it a couple of poop poop, it gets their attention. And then as soon as you stop it or start it again after that, the fish just flat annihilated. Look at this. Look at this chunk. Look at this. Look at that Bienville chunk right there. And the point I was trying to make is, you know, when the fish haven't really fired up yet and they're not super aggressive out there just mauling bait, twitch it in place. Again, using that little twitch, stop and let it sit for a second, and then a slow, steady retrieve, and just gradually speed it up a little bit more. And they love it. They absolutely love it. A lot of times what I think it is the bait hits the water and it kind of makes a splash, and it's a lot like them popping the top to eat a bait, and then they look up and they see this bait sitting there and they wait for it and they see it move and then they annihilate it. So I think it's that killer instinct that it's a crippled or injured bait and that they just have to maul it. So I like to trade on that tendency and try to trigger some strikes that way. There's one.